This is the novel I wrote, Flintlock and Cutlass. It's a story about a boy who finds himself aboard a pirate ship and kind of the adventure he ensues on thereafter. In a couple minutes, I will read you the first chapter of it, just give you a little taste. But other than that, I just want to kind of tell you about the story of it. And while this was more of a personal project, I didn't care to promote it at all online. This was the first time I'm actually mentioning it. I just wanted to tell you guys about it because I think it's pretty cool. So here's the back of the book, and if you can see, that's yours truly right there, looking all cute. And I'll just read the back of it to you to give you a little glimpse. Peter Painter doesn't know how he came aboard the Haymaker. The pirates running the ship have a perfectly reasonable explanation. They tell Peter how his hometown on the Outer Banks of Carolina came under siege by the British Navy, how they rescued him, how everything and everyone he ever knew is gone. Peter is welcomed onto the crew. He is introduced to sailing and swordplay, to gunpowder and rowdy port towns. Peter's father hated pirates. His final wish was for Peter to take the family compass and find the treasure lying somewhere at the end of its needle. But that old life is just a memory now, and Peter's face to face with a new one. Besides, nobody, not even a father, is quite as honest as they want you to believe. So, as the back mentions, the main character, Peter Painter, is from the Outer Banks. I originally got the inspiration for this story traveling to the Outer Banks myself on vacation. I think most people can agree that there's something special about the beach in general, but for those who have been to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, I think they can all agree as well that there's something extra, almost mystical about those beaches. In part, I think it has to do with their seclusion. They're not crowded by any boardwalks and anything like that. But also, for me, there's something about them being in the dunes, looking out across the water that is really beckoning, very inspirational, very whimsical. I don't know, it feels mysterious and misty and cool. And to my mind, the way I think was I need to make a story about this. Now, the first time I had went to the Outer Banks that I remember, I was about 12 years old, and I had never really written a story outside of school assignments. So the idea mostly stayed on the back burner of my mind. But it never left me, and going back over the years, I actually learned a little more about the history of the Outer Banks, and that I'm not alone or unfounded in my ideas that there's something peculiar about the Outer Banks, because I learned about the Diamond Shoals, which are like the most dangerous underwater sandbanks off the coast of the Outer Banks that for years before we had radar technology caused hundreds, maybe thousands, I believe, of ships to crash to ruin along the shores of the Outer Banks. And then also the history with pirates taking refuge in the town back in the golden age of piracy. There's a lot of like really cool history about the Outer Banks. So I realized, okay, I'm not alone in my intuition here. There really is a story here. So that's where I was like, okay, I want to try writing this. And there were a couple times at maybe 14 years old, I don't know, I tried to write out like the first page of this book because I knew it always was going to open with the main character, Peter, waking up on a ship. But like I said, I'd never written a story like this before, so every time I would start, I would think this is terrible and just backspace, and give up. Kick myself in the foot and just give up. It took me a long time to realize that that's just how it's going to feel initially, and I eventually just decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to start writing just for 30 minutes a day at least, and I'm just going to see what happens. And I stuck to that, and for a while I really did continue to really strongly dislike what I was writing, but I was like, I'm just going to do this for 30 minutes a day, and that was a digestible enough chunk of time where I could just force myself to do it, put it aside. I wouldn't allow myself to delete everything. I was like, I got to move forward, keep moving forward with each 30-minute increment. And eventually I started to like where I was going with it, and I also realized that if this was ever going to get finished, 30 minutes was going to take way too long. That would take like years. So I started to sit down for hours, maybe 1-2 hours. And I remember hearing videos and things from other authors at the time on YouTube talking about their advice on writing. And they would say a good writer has to sit down and write for 4 hours a day. Different authors have their own techniques. But when I heard that, I was like, 4 hours? I'm never going to be able to do that. Like, just sitting here for a half hour, an hour is painful. It truly is. It's excruciating. But as I got further into this journey and more comfortable with the idea of sitting in front of this computer and just pushing through, and I realized that when I do push through, I always would strike a moment of inspiration with this, where I felt like I was really in a flow state, if you will. After a while, those 4 hours became not so hard to reach, and I made a habit of it. I don't remember exactly, but this first write-through of the first draft probably took about 6 months of solid writing, and that included the slow start where it was like 30 minutes a day. So it could have been quicker, but I think that's about how long the first draft took. But then I followed the advice of Stephen King, because I read his book on writing, and he advised to put a first draft aside for at least, I think, 6 weeks after you finish writing it, and cleanse your mind of it, and then come back to it to do the first revision. And I got a lot of helpful advice from this book, so I did that. And when I finally came back to the first draft, I definitely was able to see it with a fresher set of eyes. There were definitely moments as well that were very discouraging because I had those fresh eyes, and there were some parts where I was like, this is garbage. Because with the first draft and with the first book, there's so much filler. You don't really know what needs to be said and what doesn't need to be said in telling a good story. And for a lot of it, things don't need to be said. But that's what the revision process is for. So I went through, and I think another piece of advice that came through on writing by Stephen King was the fact that a good revision should, I think, take out 25% of the original first draft. So I think I stuck pretty true to that. Naturally, I wasn't trying to, and I cut down quite a bit of unnecessary filler from the book. It wasn't anything structural. There weren't any scenes, I don't think, that got cut out. It was just over-explanation of certain things that just slowed it down. So I did that first revision process, which in some ways was a lot easier than writing it, of course, because you don't got to think of the ideas. They're already there for you, and you can just improve upon them. But I think the general sentiment when I finished that first draft was that I was very proud of my work, but I also wasn't thinking it was very good. But I was just really happy to have done that first draft, which took so long, and then that first revision, and I felt like, okay, well, here's a book. I wrote a book. This is it. It's slightly coherent now that I've trimmed it down, and it's a book I wrote. I don't think it's very good, but I'm very proud of the fact that I wrote a book. And that's kind of why I didn't feel an urge to talk about it or publicize it, because it really was just a personal venture. It was that story that I had on the back burner of my mind, and the fact that I had put it on paper, I was very proud of that. Of course, the first and only person I gave it to initially was my mom, because she had heard me talking about it for so long, and also just, lived with me as I, locked myself in my room for hours upon hours every day writing it. So I owed it to her to give her a read-through after that first revision. I gave it to a friend as well who, I don't think he ever really got through it. Gave it to another friend a couple months later, who did and really liked it. But so I got that brief amount of feedback. My mom loved it, my friend loved it, but these are people that love me, so I was, a little hesitant to taking their advice. I was like, I really appreciate that. I think that you mean that, but I don't know how I feel about it still. So I just set it aside. I was busy with other things, wrestling, music, whatever. Put it aside, and then I guess months went by. I don't remember exactly how long. Maybe 6 months. I don't know. I finally decided to just come back to it. I must have opened up that first draft again, and I was thinking about the story, and I was thinking, man, maybe I think there's something there. So I came back for that second revision, and that's where I really started to feel like I was making some good progress, because honestly, what Stephen King recommended, the minimum of waiting at least 6 weeks with to edit your first draft, I think more might be warranted, honestly, because this was when I really had fresh eyes to look at the story. I noticed things that were like suddenly blatant, where I was like, okay, I know how to fix this. This needs to be fixed. I don't know how I didn't see this before. Because even just waiting 6 weeks to edit your story, you're still pretty in it. It's still pretty fresh on your mind. You have to wait so long that you almost forget it, and it's like you're reading someone else's story. That's when the blatant mistakes really stick out to you. So I went back and really did an in-depth, top to bottom revision again. And again, it got harder because each revision, it's like you're getting a finer tooth comb, a finer sifter, and you're just trying to get the really pure stuff to remain. And finally, when I got done with that, that is what I ended up here with the third draft. Because that's what I call this. This isn't even really a finished piece because it still wasn't professionally edited or anything. It's just my third draft. So, but I got done with it and I decided I think that's pretty close to good for me, even though it's not. There's still some more minor touches that could be polished on this, but structurally, I think it's there at this point. Like this, I'm actually very proud of Flintlock and Cutlass the way I have it here, and I'm very proud that I could represent it this way. And I had known in writing it that I wanted actually my mom to do the cover art, because I think she's a great artist, and she actually did for me. She drew that. And I formatted the rest of the cover, which honestly was more painful than you might imagine, because I had to get it to the perfect dimensions to send off to the company that printed these books for me, because I actually did not use Amazon Publishing or anything, which is what a lot of self-published people do. I don't know. For me, I just felt like it was a little cheesy. Like, I didn't really want to sell these. I just wanted to have some copies for myself that I could give to family and stuff. And I didn't want to sell it. I don't know why. I figured, like, if I was ever going to sell it someday, I'd want to do it the traditional way. I'd want to get it really published. And if it wasn't good enough for that, then I didn't want it out there. I don't know why. That's just, I'm a stubborn guy. I'm a do-it-yourself kind of guy. That's the way I think about it. Now, I got 35 of these copies made, and I've given away probably, like, somewhere in between 10 and 15 of them now to friends and family. I haven't sold any of them, haven't made a dime off this, but I'm just really proud to be able to hold my book in my hand. It's got 10 chapters. It's like 230 pages. I mean, give or take. It's also a smaller copy. I wanted to make it smaller than most novels. I don't know why. So it's 200-something pages, but really, in a traditional novel, it's not very long. Anyway, I am very proud of this creation, although I do have to admit that no matter how much editing I do, like I said, I did 2 revisions of this. I know most books really have more, but no matter how long you sit in front of the computer and think you got out every little mistake, man, there's a million more. I think it's perfect, and every time I open this book, I have to close it because I see things that I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this? Even from typos to just like blatant redundancy on some pages. But at the end of the day, I just have to close this and take a deep breath and say, I'm never going to be able to get all these little dings out. Like professional publishers and professional authors have dedicated copy editors that get those little mistakes out, and I'm just one man, and for that I think this is pretty good. But with all that being said, I'll read you the first chapter just because it's not very long, and you're probably curious at this point. So, Flintlock and Cutlass by Ben Grabia. Here's the table of contents. Like I said, it's got 10 chapters. I'll read you the names of the chapters. Chapter 1, I Am a Painter. Chapter 2, The Haymaker. Chapter 3, For Lack of Powder. Chapter 4, Yet Another Strange Place. Chapter 5, Make a Move. Chapter 6, The Compass. Chapter 7, Slave Ship. Chapter 8, Homesick. Chapter 9, The Diamond Shoals. Chapter 10, An Abundance of Powder. And the epilogue. Alright. Chapter 1, I Am a Painter. A seagull screeching in the distance. Waves crashing below. A light sea spray misting my face. All this would have been pleasant if it weren't for the throbbing pain splitting my head in two. With much effort, I sat up and opened my eyes. I was lying upon weathered wooden planks. Beyond them, endless blue. Light-headed, legs wobbling. I rose to my feet as if for the first time. Balance was impossible. I swayed and stumbled. Only with a deep breath was I able to settle my screaming head to an indoor voice. The deck I stood upon stretched out in front of me at great length, holding the 3 masts and tattered sails, which towered above, full of wind. A spoked wooden wheel was centered on the deck just before me. Behind it, a large, dark man was steering. "Beautiful scene to wake up to, isn't it?" he called out over the wind. He spoke with an islander's accent. My lips resisted parting. My throat was dry as sand. It would have been near impossible to speak, even if I had been able to think of a response. The man pulled out 2 compasses and compared them. One was unremarkable. The other was golden and oddly familiar. "Not too far from Jamaica now," he said. "Jamaica," I said, though it was more breath than volume. The man was smiling. I swallowed. "No, Carolina. I'm from Carolina." The man nodded. "Yes, beautiful town you're from, but I think you'll like Port Royal all the same." "Who are you?" My head screamed as I spoke. The man turned from the wheel to face me fully, revealing the full extent of his broad frame. His perfectly white cotton shirt was pressed against his skin by the wind. His pants were a darker, thicker material of the same condition. His boots were polished pristine. A sheathed blade was hung on one hip, and a holstered gun on the other. "I'm the captain. Who are you?" I rubbed my head, shut my eyes. To my dismay, he was still there when I opened them. "Take me home." The captain's smile faltered. It was replaced by a darker look of regret. "Not much left of it now, I'm afraid," he said. "Damn lobsterbacks to thank for that." A hatch opened up in the deck a few feet behind the wheel. A short, round, and stocky man climbed out. "Ah, the little one's finally awake," he said. The straggly red hair, both on the Irishman's head and in his beard, was greasy, and his big smile was compromised by the yellow of his teeth. "I'm Plum," he said to me, grinning. I looked back and forth between the 2 unfamiliar men who were so frustratingly nonchalant, unable to decide which of my 1,000,000 questions to ask first. "What do you mean about lobsterbacks?" "You haven't told him?" Plum said. "Actually," the captain said, "I was just getting ready to. Go fetch Riley to watch the wheel. I'm taking our guest here below deck." "Aye, Cap'n," the fat man. "Aye, Cap'n," said the fat man Plum. Scene break. "No, that can't be." The men were silent. I was sitting with Plum, the captain, and at least a dozen other new faces in the dark space below deck. Our stools were centered around a few wooden crates, pushed together to form a table. On them was a deck of playing cards, a bottle of whiskey, a few copper mugs, and a lantern, which offered only a dim, yellow illumination to the area. "Sorry, kid," Plum said. "Really, we are." The rest of them were scratching their chins, looking around at the walls, avoiding my gaze. The captain stared into the pit of his whiskey cup as he drained it. "Please," I said, "surely you're all joking." "Afraid not. That's the terrible truth." "Just tell me one more time. Surely I'm missing something." Plum sighed, frowning. The captain stepped in. "One more time, but that's it. You shan't be dwelling on this for too long." I just hoped that somehow the story's details would be different this time around. 3 nights ago, the captain said, we were in port, in, what did you call it? Corolla. I'm from Corolla. Ah, yes. We had stopped in Corolla for the night, to resupply on our way to Jamaica. We were at the bar, enjoying ourselves with your kind townsfolk, when all of a sudden a man burst in, yelling something about British vessels. Before we could even make sense of the guy, the captain threw his hands apart. An explosion. Cannon fire. Your town was under siege. I looked around the table at the nodding faces, once again trying but unable to imagine such a thing taking place back home. And we'd had a few, you see, so now we're running out of the bar, tripping over ourselves trying to make it back to the harbor, to our ship. Meanwhile, the town is in total chaos, the cannons keep firing, and all around us houses are being blown apart. How many could they have possibly hit? I found it hard to believe cannons would be effective at that range. The Brits came into the town on foot as well, one of the other lantern-lit faces said. Torched the ones the cannons missed. The captain shot the man a dirty look. This was a whole new terrifying detail to the story. I pictured the bar, the docks, Mr. Teach's mansion, all the places I knew, going up in flames. Did you run into any of them? Sort of, the captain said. Going through the town was too dangerous, so we had to take the long way around to the harbor. We kept our heads down and ran for the trees. That's where we found you. I tried to make sense of it all. The cottage my father and I lived in was in the woods outside of town, but how they would have ended up there on their way to the harbor, I just couldn't understand. My throbbing head was just too jumbled to picture any of it. We stumbled across the clearing of your house by accident, the captain said, and, apparently, so had two of the redcoats. It was them and a third man. Your father, I believe. What did he look like? I told you already, boyo. Smaller guy like you. Brown hair like yours. Wore mariner's clothes. That sounded like my dad. But then again, that sounded like anyone. And what happened? It was another question I did not actually want the answer to. They were hurting him, the captain said. One of the sailors in the back spoke up again. He put up a good fight for a while, but they were two and he was one. It got ugly. Once they had him on the ground. Enough, the captain said with a voice that rattled the whiskey bottle on the table. You all just stood there and watched them beat him? Well, come on, kid. It was Plum talking now. We were all mixed up. It was total chaos. We had seen men die already that night, and we were just trying to make it back to the ship, and I heard none of it. All I could see was my father, strong-willed as he was, invincible as he had always seemed, helpless against a couple British sailors. We didn't know why the Brits were there in the first place. For all we knew, they had good reason to attack. Really? I said, raising my voice. My head was thundering. You saw Corolla. You spoke to the people. Do you honestly mean to tell me that any of them seemed like criminals to you? What could they have possibly been guilty of? Just a bunch of fishermen. The worst men amongst us are maybe a few. Corolla was a tiny town, on a tiny island in a collection of islands that make up the Outer Banks, just off the coast of Carolina. Before waking up on the ship, I had never been any place else. Corolla was quiet. Everyone knew everyone, and outsiders, other than passing merchants, rarely visited. Well, I guess that's the sort of place that appeals to pirates, because a few summers prior, one moved in. His name was Edward Teach. Mr. Teach arrived and decided to have himself a house built. It was the biggest one in town, by far, and the only one of its kind I had ever seen. What they call a mansion. Much of the town took 2 fishing seasons off just to help in the construction of it. The house took at least 18 months to build, with different cumbersome loads of its foreign materials arriving in port all the while, but Mr. Teach paid well, in gold, so he never had trouble keeping labor. Mr. Teach only ever stayed a couple months at a time, coming and going and always keeping his head down while in town. But, over the years, word must have spread through his circle of people. More began showing up. We all knew who they really were, but no one spoke of it. There was no need to. No one, other than my dad that is, ever seemed to mind their presence on account of all the money they brought into town. There were, of course, rumors that the men had bounties on their heads, that the law was after them. Never had I even considered the possibility, however, that the Navy itself would come blowing up the whole town looking for them. I dropped my finger, letting Plum out of its accusatory tract. This is a lot. No, you're right, Plum said. We could have done something and we didn't. He looked on into the dark abyss of the room. After a long time in our line of work, it's easy to become jaded. If you're not careful, you'll lose a bit of your own human decency. Before I had the chance to ask what line of work that was exactly, the captain cut back in. No. Remember, Plum, we would have lent a hand, if not for our heroic young friend here. He seemed to have it all under control. Me? I said. That's right, said the captain. You came out of the house as the men were attacking your father. They didn't see you coming. You shot one of them square in the chest. Shot one of them? This was a new addition to the tale. I hadn't made it this far before. With what? I almost asked, but the answer was obvious. Dad's hunting rifle. It had sat on our mantel my whole life. When I'd first been taught to use it as a boy, I had barely been able to hold the thing, and deathly afraid of the noise it produced. Now, at 14, though, I was quite the marksman. Often I'd bring home rabbits or boar for dinner, sometimes a deer. Dad would always be standing in the doorway when I returned, beaming, and I'd fight to keep the smile off my face as I presented my catch to him. Then I pictured the same man pinned to the ground, his face bloody and beaten. The idea that I had killed someone was suddenly not so hard to believe. And then what? The other one ran away? Plum shook his head. You gave him a scare, all right, but your shot was spent. The captain nodded. You were trying to reload. I never would have had enough time. The damn gun took a lifetime. He grabbed the rifle, fought it out of your hands. The thought was painful, embarrassing. I gave the order to intervene then, and yes, I should have acted sooner, but you must understand, we truly didn't know the situation. The captain frowned. He struck you with the butt of the rifle, and you went down. Don't you remember any of this? I shook my head, scared because it was the truth. I hadn't even a shred of memory for any of the events they described. The story was impossible. I'm sorry, laddie, Plum said. Can't imagine your confusion. The captain nodded. We took care of the Brit and made sure you were still breathing. Of course, we couldn't just leave you there, the town as it was. If more of them found you... What about my father? The men all shifted in their chairs. He died. How do you know? I looked around at them, pleading. How do you know? You just left him there? He didn't make it. I know he didn't. The thought was too much. You bastards were cold enough to watch them beat him dead, I said. Why even bother with me? All you guys cared about was getting to your boat, right? You should have just left me. I'd rather be dead than out here, in the middle of who knows where. The captain spoke again, in that booming voice that left no room for others. We would have never done such a thing. He waved a hand at the other men in the room. We all know what it's like, being thrown in a bad situation for no fault of your own. We help the helpless when we can. You kidnapped me. The captain laughed. Hardly. The captain just kept smiling, as if he hadn't just delivered me the strangest, worst news of my life. What is your name, boyo? I rubbed at the lump on the back of my head and was panicked when, for a second, I could not come up with an answer. Peter, I said finally. I'm Peter Painter. That is chapter 1 of Flintlock and Cutlass by me, Ben Gravia. Yeah, thanks for listening. Let me know you guys' thoughts. I just wanted to share a little bit about this kind of a passion project, I guess you could call it. And if you want to hear more of the story, let me know. Maybe I wouldn't be adverse to just reading the whole thing and posting it on here so you guys could listen to the audiobook. But yeah, let me know if there's interest for that. Remember, in terms of music, my name's Benny BNG. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. My music is everywhere. I'm working on an album. My first album's going to come out this May. And I'm going to be famous soon. So think about subscribing.